Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. Yes, they did. They absolutely got it correct. Or do I say absolutely got it right, because that's the name of the program. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, and we're here again at the good graces of Liberty Works Radio Network, and I appreciate being on the program and having them host the program. They've been so gracious. And we, as always, have lots to cover. I mean, it's just amazing. So where I want to start today was this whole idea that, I think we're supposed to, anyway, those people that have, a faith environment, those that call ourselves believers, Christians, followers of Jesus, that it is our responsibility and absolutely our duty to dig in and study and read the Bible. So it's something that I make every effort to do every day. And in doing so, it's always interesting in what you learn. It's all about not just developing the relationship, but looking at what is it about mankind? What is it about society? What is it that is relative, most importantly, from the fact and reality of God's sovereignty? So it was, I just had this burning idea to flip back into the New Testament for a little bit, because where I've been is studying about Solomon and trying to understand, what happened to the wisest man on the planet ever, except for Jesus, that, one of the most wealthy men on the planet ever. And the conclusion that I came to in reading about him in the Old Testament was that, he was cooking along. He had intimate relationships, even, personal conversations with the living God. And, what flipped him just simply was he ended up getting greedy and lustful, okay? So he had, like I think it said, all in end, he had hundreds, if not thousands, of concubines and wives. And each one of them then corrupted the whole essence of Israel through him in what they did and allowed. The point in that one was that you have a leadership. And when that leadership makes a transition from morality and virtue, both private and public, then it is natural. And you can see this in the course of history, and you can see this in the course of biblical studies, especially in the Old Testament, is that what happens is that stuff occurs and God judges the nations. I know some people don't like to hear about God judging the nations or God judging anything, but you know what? The reality is that he is, and this is the thing that we have to attest to, is that he's the sovereign of everything. I bring that up all the time. Now, the point on Solomon, then I got thinking and I'm going, wow, this is interesting and all of that. But I got thinking and going, so wait a minute, let's think about this. Is that what happened was that Israel always elected. Israel was a form of a republic. When you study it, Althusius talks about it. We look at it from a perspective of governance, is that they were a federated republic, okay? And that based on what that means from a geopolitical system, those that were the primary leaders within that ultimately were not only those tens, hundreds, thousands, those heads over all of that sat in that political body, and from each tribe as that was built, and that was part of the federation, was amongst those tribes. It wasn't that Israel was all hunky-dory and brotherly love, because we see throughout the Old Testament, once again, that no, that's not necessarily true, especially when Judah and Israel broke right after Solomon, and that was something that was promised would happen. And in that, they weren't all that lovey-dovey towards one another. In fact, the only thing that held them together was good leadership and the fact that they were able to form alliances amongst the tribes. And even before that, even before the fall of Solomon, every tribe had to come together to show its allegiance and its vote in even taking and bringing taking what God would anoint and saying, yes, that would be our king. No different with Saul, no different with David and then Solomon and so on. And we saw factions that even happened in that. So when you look from that political perspective within that. But then today I really got going and I'm going, well, Jesus addressed the people, and we were looking at all of the people that would follow Jesus. And then I got thinking about it a little bit more. So who else did Jesus address? And who was it he would call out? And I got going through Matthew, of all places. And the reason I went to Matthew, I'm going to talk about in a moment, because we're going to be talking about levies and local taxation. But you got to set the framework for this. And the framework is that Jesus called out not only the political leaders, but the political religious leaders. Because if you understand that political establishment within the context of that time is that it was the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the scribes that were the primary people within the Sanhedrin. And they were the ones that were the political ruling body from that theocratic position. So when you start thinking all of that through, and the fact that Israel was divided, you had what was going on in Jerusalem. That's why Jesus would go back and forth to Samaria and back down into Judea, was because the tribes were split. The whole thing is that it wasn't all Israel. So you got to think about the political position. And the fact and reality is that Jerusalem was a city that God called for himself, and that he said would be a primary city in relationship to how he viewed the people that we call the Jewish race, or the people of Israel. But it was a divided, because you had Judah that was there in that area of Jerusalem, and another tribe. And you had then all of the other tribes that were up in Samaria. And that's, what happened up there. So those other tribes of Israel. Now, what became very interesting to me, and this is where I wanted to focus a little bit, is that when I started going through and I'm looking at, just in Matthew alone, how Jesus takes and he is constantly, and you're constantly seeing that the Sadducees and Pharisees are always trying to figure out a way to trip him up. Not only that, the scribes are, trying to figure out how to trip up Jesus. So there's obvious sections in there on their subversion, as well as then, how Jesus responds to that. So it's not only is it from a what many and most Christians and pastors look at it is from the gospel perspective, is the soul side of it, the spiritual side of it, and we unfortunately over-spiritualize, to the extent that we forget that we have to live in this world. If I pinch myself, I'm going to say, ouch. Kathy pinches me, I'm going to say, ouch. If she gives me a hug, I'm going to say, yes. But, at the same time, we live in this world. We're expected to, but not being of it, as Paul writes. And so what we have is that we're seeing that a political, and in this case with Israel is a theocracy to an extent, is that we have this political environment that is really upset because the people, if they were called to a vote, and this is in both Judea and Samaria, if the people, as they always had been, to take and bring a king to the throne, if the tribes were called together, the high probability would be that Jesus would have been elected as king, which he rightfully is, absolutely, without, through the course of Scripture. So what we have is the political elite. First off, let's be very, very clear on that, because they were the political elite, not just the religious elite. Okay, they held two positions within that context of ruling over, especially in the area of Judah, Jerusalem, and all of that. Much to that's up in Samaria, the other tribes just kind of gave it up, and they had a mass dispersion, as we well know, further back in the history of what happened up in the area of Samaria and the tribes of Israel. So why is that important for today? Well, because we have so many pastors out there, and even pastors of large churches, and even in this area, they'll tell you that particular section in Matthew where Jesus says, and he's being questioned about taxation, and he says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And then Paul, also talks about that in Romans 13, is that they don't or they won't differentiate. They do understand, very, very bright, especially a particular pastor that I'm aware of here, that I sat and I listened to what he had to say, and he was telling people, just pay your taxes. That's your duty according to Scripture. Well, not in America, okay? It's your duty only because you choose to do it. And the fact is, and we're going to get into it on Levies, is that you are the citizenry, you are the government, and you cannot apply what was happening during that geopolitical period that Jesus lived to what is American constitutionalism, okay? And we're going to cover that. And what's also important is something, I'm a member of Academia EDU, because I write academic type of stuff, even though I'm not an academic, and people follow me on that. But there was a very interesting article that came out, that's out there. I haven't read the full thing yet, but it's called Political Theology and International Law. Isn't that interesting? So when we think about what does political theology mean, and not only that, what is it relative to what's happening here? And we're seeing a lot of that with all of these whacked out denominations that are taking and saying abortion's okay, and it's Christian, all these stuff, that just is not biblically correct. This whole paper from the University of Manchester School of Law, as a faculty member, is this John Haskell, is Political Theology and International Law. So I just wanted to set the stage that what happens is important. What's taught from the pulpit has to be biblically sound, but at the same time, what we have to do within the churches, which we're not doing, is bring that into the context of what happens in daily life. What does that mean? How is it applied from the various principles that are there? I mean, that's what Sam Adams was all about. And as we're coming kind of towards the end of this section, and we're going to get into why is that important when we talk about levies. Well, the reality is that Sam Adams always said that everything was local, and Sam being a very, very strong Puritan, which means he was a very, very strong Calvinist, which also means that in many of his writings, you will see that he brings those biblical truths into perspective, especially when it comes to the ideas of what is a republic and what does it mean to have that federation within that. That's why he was on the committee that put together the Articles of Confederation. How do you confederate amongst the states? So he was very, very important in that, and he wrote a good portion of the original Massachusetts Constitution. So when it comes to understanding that becomes a very critical component that we have, and as we talked about in Federalist number 10, and also in the Anti-Federalist paper over the course of the last few weeks, just as a reminder, is that we have to understand human nature and the morality of things, because Sam Adams did. And Sam Adams, when he was writing, he was very poignant about all of that. So we're going to continue On this vein, as we come back into the next segment of Samuel Adams, yes, he's an anti-federalist, and they got it right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, yes, they did. They absolutely got it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty does work for you. And again, I am so thankful to be on Liberty Works Radio Network. I appreciate everything that they are doing in the pursuit of liberty. And you know what? They're into all the various markets. Go take a look at the website. Please support them. And all you folks in Maryland, wow, a lot going on. But we're going to jump into talking about levies in a minute, maybe more. Okay, more than a minute. You know me. I'll go down that rabbit hole when I get there. But I wanted to follow up from the last segment a little bit more on political theology and international law. The premise within that and the way that the article goes is that it includes the introduction and conclusion to the text on this. Political theology and international law offers an account of the intellectual debates surrounding the term political theology in academic literature concerning international law. Beneath these differences is a shared tradition or genre within the literature that reinforces particular styles of characterizing and engaging predicaments in global politics. The text develops an argument toward another way of thinking about the political theology, or what political theology might offer international law scholarship. A politics of truth, which I thought just that introduction alone, and again, I haven't had the time to delve into it because I just received this. And when we talk about a politics of truth, that is kind of a summation of what I was talking about in the first segment, in that, you know, it is the gospel, and I'm not just going to, the gospel, in a sense, from a word usage, sometimes is overused. Let's say that the good news of the salvation that is for all those in Christ is a predominant factor in understanding, is the only factor, not just predominant, but is the only factor in understanding truth. And as I outlined in the first segment, is that the truth of Jesus was also within the concept of a political environment, not just a religious environment. He challenged the political norms. He challenged false interpretation of law. He challenged the means and methodology of implementation of governance. I'm sorry, pastors out there, Jesus challenged from his truth perspective in the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelations, not from a social gospel perspective, but as the sovereign king, that the political establishment in that Judea, Samaria areas, if the people were given and they understood that they had a right to vote for a king, if they understood that they had that right, which over the years since Hosea, the last prophet, if you will, or was he the last prophet? Maybe, I don't know. Go back and look. I'm going to test you on this one. Since the last prophet, that last writing in the Old Testament, and that gap in time, they forgot that they could have a king. All right. And the way that they did that, the processes, the political processes upon which the tribes would elect a king, even if they were just in Judea, let alone what happened in Samaria and the rest of Israel. So with all of those abilities, what was laid out scripturally, what was laid out even traditionally for governance, they forgot. they didn't know. That kind of parallels a lot of the things that are happening today when we take in our educational system does not talk about us being a constitutional republic. And in fact, what it really means is that when we do not have our different congregations and pastors who will not take and utilize those people who clearly understand constitutionalism to help the congregations clearly understand what it means to live in our United States constitutional republic and the various states in which they reside, and what those constitutions are as well in those states. Now, let me point, here's the point as we get onto local stuff, because the international law thing, I don't even want to go down that path, because I'll tell you what, I could take 5 hours talking about that. But where I wanted to get to is talking about the levies. And what does that mean? Because what we have, and you have to remember in this republic, is we're not, and this was what the Anti-Federalist, and excuse me for getting excited here for a moment, but this is exactly what the Anti-Federalists were talking about, is that the potentials for people to all of a sudden think that the federal government is everything to everybody, and in their minds that it supersedes the states, is absolutely false. Okay? Drive that baby home. That is false. It's a lie. It's deception. And this whole thing that I've heard from the pulpit is, you have to pay your taxes. That's what Jesus said in Matthew, and that's what Paul talks about in Romans, is a false application of those biblical truths. Okay? And when we take and we bring that historically relevant to today, I'll go back to Sam Adams every time, because I really studied that a bit the last few days in preparation for this program, in how Sam Adams looked at all government being local. And you have to remember that the whole essence of what happened in even forming the United States, the very, very beginning, was what was happening locally. What was happening from Parliament that was imposing taxation, was imposing the economic and trade barriers within that region of Massachusetts colony alone, and within those colonies, let alone then how it spread across the other colonies, because now it was the law of the land. So a wrap back just for a second, because I didn't finish it and I apologize. If the people understood within the context of their tribes, their history, their position and political position within the context of the tribe that is already laid out in the Mosaic Law, if they understood that at that personal level, they understand that they are part of a republic, a tribal republic with heads within that, and also within the representative government that was overseen within the context of the Sanhedrin. So when we look at Jesus's potential on how he was received by the people as the true king, the absolute sovereign of the universe, God with us, Emmanuel, predicted within the whole, in the Psalms, come on, go back and read your Bible. But here we have the sovereign of the universe that had the potential of being elected. And we have to look at God's plan. Obviously, that wasn't his plan for Jesus to be elected then and show his sovereignty then. But he identified himself very, very clearly to Pontius Pilate as a king. No question whatsoever. But as we know, because of man's sinfulness, corruption, and political corruption in particular, Jesus called out these people. We weren't going to see him because God's greater purpose was that he needed to be that perfect sacrifice for us. Wow, that one blows me away. And I'm not, you can hear that from your pulpit. You can go study that from the scriptures. The majority of pastors are absolutely correct on that. But we have to look at and consider that he did call out that political environments. So in doing that, and us living in a constitutional republic, which means our states are constitutional. And you know what? I just give an understanding that Jesus is sovereign, and that's where we have to look at knowing that, especially if you call yourself a Christian, knowing that God is sovereign. That means what is His sovereignty, and us as His people, His church, His agents here acting within society. You need to start thinking that one through in a um, real manner and meaningful manner, because I'm telling you, as I said on taxation and that, the majority of pastors, even, mega church, really smart guys, just don't get it right from my studied perspective and opinion. And I'll take Sam Adams' studied biblical researched opinion on that as well. So in making that move, you're the people that have to vote on levies. You're the people that have to elect representatives that then go to your state legislature, and then the other ones that go to your federal legislature to act in your stead. That's what a republic is all about. That's how it functions, is that we take and have representatives that are supposed to do what our immediate environment expects them to do. And I'm not going to get into the congressional side. We're going to stay local. So the thing on levies and education is, and particularly to the state of Ohio, is that there are things that we'll cover. And what I'm going to do is I am going to put again the link up, or I have put the links up to a couple of articles that I've written on self-inflicted eviction and the consequences of passing local levies. And you're the government. I'm going to drive this home as we're coming to a close. What do we got? 2 minutes left, Kath? We got 3 minutes left here in the second segment. Got to drive it home. And I know many of you, I'm preaching to the choir. If you have a choir in your church, most don't. They have worship teams. But if you have a choir in your church, I'm preaching to you, choir. The whole thing is that you are in America within the context of the United States. You're a citizen of your state first. So I'm a citizen of Ohio, and I reside in Geauga County, and that there are many different things within our county that are state established as far as taxing subdivisions, which we'll talk about. And then if our property taxes, when the state was established, and we'll talk about that in the next segment because we're down to the 2-minute mark, is that the state figured they got to run government somehow. So right away, they established that 1% of the value of your property in the state of Ohio would automatically be taxed as a way to run both state and local government. Okay? So, especially in local government, in your counties. And so out of that, money is distributed. But what they did over time, and this was not anticipated at the time that the state was formed, is that you'd have all these other taxing little subdivisions out there that would be vying and arguing and fighting for the money, and they would be doing all this other political maneuvering, and they would be all the people that are trying to do good, but in essence it's stuff that the government should not ever be doing. And you, the churches, yes, you are. You're supposed to have done that. I mean, mental health, addiction, housing, all of that used to be a component of what was happening within the church, making sure there weren't homeless, making sure that people had good moral foundations so that we didn't have all of this mental health stuff, all these things that went on in school. Churches help direct public education as much as public education. Well, Christians were very, very involved in public education. Now you're not. You turned it over to the humanist and most likely evil content, which we're seeing more and more in the state of Ohio. So as you take and look at that, you have to fund it with your property taxes. And if those subdivisions aren't getting their money out of that 1%, they're coming to you, baby. You have to make the decision. You have to vote. And Sam Adams always said, what? all politics, all government is local. So as we think about that, come on back into this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, yes, they did. They absolutely got it right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they absolutely did. They absolutely got it right. And we're not going to get into all the other national stuff and all. I mean, I got a whole list of stuff that I wanted to cover on my smartphone here, on different things. But we got to stay on these levies. This is a problem all over the country. This is not just an Ohio, Geauga County issue. This is an issue with folks that I've been talking to in Washington, things I've been seeing out of Texas, things I've been seeing in every state in the nation. Why is that? Why is it that property taxes are such a problem? Well, let's go back just to Ohio, and you're going to have to look it up for your own state, because I think a lot of states are similar. But once again, please go refer to your own state history and your state constitution, and then your revised code. Yeah, I'm asking a lot of you. You're not an attorney, but you know something? If we're a citizen, sure would make sense if we understood a little bit how our government worked. Yeah, it's shocking. It's shocking. We just don't. And we assume, and this is once again where I'm going to hammer on you pastors out there, is we assume that those folks that represent us are making correct decisions. Well, I hate to tell you this, but the majority of them don't know. We don't do a good job, and I am pointing fingers at the Republicans in particular, and the churches more in particular, because we do not raise up those moral and virtuous people that we talked about in Federalist 10 and Anti-Federalist 10 that should be governing, should be representing us, should be in, and that's a legal term. Shall and should are legal terms. So let me see. Should be is that superlative, that those are the people that must be in government, because otherwise you cannot get good government. And that's something that Madison was very, very clear on, and he got that from understanding what Witherspoon was teaching in what is a moral populace and a moral people and a virtuous people that can self-govern. So taking that and putting that all aside, every state that I have been looking at, and I have a chart up from Zwilla that shows the property tax issues across the different cities in the state. So you're going to have to go to the references, and I may drop it. I'll drop it in the video as we render the video to put it up on YouTube. So that chart, I'll drop that chart in this segment where I'm burning time, so that we can scan through that chart of what Zwilla is looking at for property taxes across the United States. The interesting aspect of all of that is that they are egregious, and especially for schools. Schools need to be spanked very, very much, but we're not going to get into schools. What I want to do is exclude, and the attachments that you can go to and read the articles exclude schools in the levies. So let's jump just back to Ohio for a little bit, and let's talk about all of these different taxing authorities, these subdivisions that are in the Ohio Revised Code, some of which were in the Constitution, and some of them that were constitutionally, and when the state was constituted, were meaningful for civil society to function. And so you had to have a means of funding that is reasonable. So 1% on a property tax on your property valuation for the state of Ohio, Okay, that's understandable, but then it gets worse from there because that's what's called the inside millage in so many ways. But the outside millage is what you vote on in excess of that 1% of your valuation. Wow. And it adds up, folks. It adds up. If you haven't felt the pain of it, you should go and look at what you have for your political subdivisions and understand that. So, political subdivision, according to the Ohio Revised Code, lists these number of entities. Let's see, taxing authorities or bond issuing authority. We have all of these that are any county, municipal corporation, township, township police district, joint police district, township fire district, joint fire district, joint ambulance district, joint emergency medical service district, fire and ambulance district, joint recreation district, township waste disposal district, township road district, community college district, technical college district, detention facility district. Whatever this is, you got to go look that up. What is a detention facility district? Anyway, a combined district organized under section 2152.41 and 2151.65 of the revised code. What in the world is that? A joint county alcohol, drug addiction, and mental health service district. I know what that is because I sit on the board of that for Geauga County. A drainage improvement district created under section 6131.52 of the revised code. A lake facility authority created under chapter 353 of the revised code. A union cemetery district. A county school financing district. Oh boy, here we go. Those weren't there when the when things were formed. A city, local, exempted, village, cooperative education, or joint vocational school district. Blah. That's a mouthful, and that's a single district with all that gobbledygook all layered into it. Okay. Or, here we go, last one. A regional student education district created under section 3313.83 of the revised code. That's a whole bunch of stuff. That's a whole bunch of stuff. So then in there and in this article, I give, who is the authority over all of these things. In the case of the county, I'm not going to read them all, is the Board of County Commissioners. In the case of municipal corporation is the council or other legislative authority. In the case of the city, local, exempt, village, cooperation, education, or joint vocational schools, it's your Board of Education. Oh, okay. Case of community college, it's the Board of Trustees. And on it goes. In the case, and I'm going to get down here, in the case of the joint police districts, it's a joint police district board. Other places, it's trustees. In the case of the county alcohol, drug addiction, and mental services, it is the district's board of mental health and addiction services. And so what we have in the case, and there's more that's in there too. There's a HUD, there's a this, there's a that, and there's all these different boards are formed. Now, you have to understand that some of this stuff that's in there, like the mental health and some of these policing districts and a lot of these other things, what happened was you had these organizations that lobbied for that all to be put into the Ohio Revised Code. Because the only one that's in the Constitution, well, there's a couple, but the primary one that's in the Constitution is education. And here in Ohio, the Ohio Supreme Court back in 97, 98 found that the funding mechanism within the Ohio State Constitution is unconstitutional. Go figure that one. It's in the Constitution, but it's unconstitutional. Anyway, but the point is that all these other entities were lobbied for and added to the Ohio Revised Code. And they all have boards, and they're independent of the county commissioners. And the boards, with the way that the administrative gobbledygook is all set and put together, are the ones that then get some of this money from this 1% of your property tax of this inside millage, and it is distributed to them to function within the scope of things that they are required to do according to the Ohio Revised Code. And I'm going to tell you, it's thick stuff in the majority of them. You got a bunch of stuff that doesn't make it simple, okay? And what the requirements are, and some of it are unfunded and funded mandates that come down from the federal government. So as we're getting into our last 5 minutes, the whole point of this is that if that 1%, as I said in the last segment, does not take and give these entities, these political subdivisions, understand that, political subdivision, if it does not give them the financial capacity to execute what they are required to execute by Ohio Revised Code, and everybody else out there, you need to go check this out because I'm sure your states are very much the same way, is that it's mandated that you have this stuff inside your counties, which means then that your property taxes and that 1% is not sufficient because in Ohio, 46%, about 46% of that 1% goes to schools. Gone. Right out to schools. So now you're taking that other, 54%? That 4% has to be divided up between all these entities. You think they can function? No. So what do? Pastors out there that say pay your taxes, no, to the government because the government mandates it. No, the government doesn't mandate it. What it is because things were lobbied for by other people that think or want to do good things, because the majority of these things are, kind of like good things. I think what you need to go different pastors and churches and parishioners and folks that are in a church, go back and look at these things and say, oh, wait a minute, this is what the church should be doing. This is what we used to do 100 years ago. And, if you got your tax, anyway, I'm not going to get into that solution set because I think we'll pick up on that. We'll pick up on it next week on what some of the solution set is. But let's face it and look at it this way. And here it is, folks. Catch it. It is that the 1% doesn't cover all of this, but you have to. Okay. And how much above that 1% you believe that all of these entities should have to function is up to you. And in the most cases, like in the things of library boards and all of that type of stuff, that all sounds wonderful. They come at you emotionally telling you they need more money. But why? Why do they need more money? That's what you need to ask for. In most cases, they don't need more money. What they need to do is learn how to live within the budgets they have. And what is it that they want to do as a good thing that somebody else should do and take responsibility for as a citizen or as a other civic organization or as a church organization? I have to tell you, I wrote the articles and I'm calling them self-induced eviction because, ladies and gentlemen, most people cannot afford anymore the property taxes. We have in Geauga County a aging population. We have flat growth rate. We have a declining, 10% declining across the state of Ohio, declining incomes. Schools are egregious and lying to you because we have declining population in the schools and they want more money. Why? But the reality is, even for all of these different organizations and these subdivisions, why is it? Right now, the whole perspective of what's going on is that all levies everywhere are unaffordable. You can't afford them anymore, especially if you're on a fixed income. And I don't care if you have a great large portfolio and you live in, $1 million homes. There's people that have come to me and complained they're paying over $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in taxes and property taxes. That's egregious. It's not right. So as what you need to do is you need to go to your county auditors and start figuring this out And what you need to do as we come into this election season, which is happening, is I recommend until you get full disclosure, full transparent disclosure on what's happening with all these different levies into the detail and take the emotionalism out, you need to vote no. Because there's other tricks that are in here on continuing resolutions. And so Sam Adams was all about taxation and what it meant not to be overtaxed. So come on back next week when we return, and we'll continue to talk about levies here on Sam Adams.